If a weapon ain't got kick, it just ain't worth it. The subtle inclining street leading up to the powder keg workshop was laid with soot. Strewn about it were charred carcasses of the night's blood fiends. With a light run, they passed through the street, the hunters running in a circle around the defenseless, who by now was incredibly fatigued and weary of everything. The only difference between them and the hunters was that the latter tried to mask their woes. Some needed support from others as they made their way, but it was not without its hints of frightened hesitation, wrought by nightmarish paranoia. When every hunter in relief started to pick up their speed, having seen the lights and familiar figures of the fortified workshop, the townspeople must have felt the sense of reprieve as well, for they could match the pace of the eager hunters. Powder kegs guarding the door looked away from their rifle sight and opened the door for them. They all stumbled inside, where some flat out fell to the floor and remained laying, chest heaving with exhaustion. Now the glow of the red moon and violet sky had exchanged into that of warm candles, and hearth in a large entry room filled with both hunters and civilians of many trades. Jura felt especially at ease when he saw the familiar blue light of a dream lamp shining inside the adjacent room. "How many have survived?" Jura inquired to one of the powder kegs that now stood over them in anticipation.
"We are counting 34 heads currently. Then add those that were with you."
Any workshop hunters?
"Some have come and gone. Sorry, Jura."
He did not feel particularly sorry. He knew it was their duty to be out there, under the red moon.
"What's the plan? The beasts are becoming fiercer and show no sign of being cooled. We should leave with those alive."
Henrik spoke up.
"There's little more we can do. We must start consider the safety for the rest of Yharnam. What if they start to turn their foul noses on the church?"
"I agree," Jura answered. "You should all leave and warn the church to seal off old Yharnam."
"There is no need."
Kenrick, followed by several powder kegs carrying smaller barrels, emerged from a cellar entryway.
"Get them out, yes. Seal off, unnecessary."
He put the barrel down and patted on its lid. Gunpowder. While Jura started to slowly form his own speculation of their issues, Fiachra came up by his side. Seeing him, Kenrick looked as if he had just noticed him.
"What do you mean to set ablaze with this much powder, Kenrick?"
"The town."
For a night filled to the brim with different sounds of horror, it became more frightening when silence finally fell over them in the gathering hall of the powder keg workshop.
"Don't be so naive. We all know it. All these beasts. We cannot hope to slay them all by our hands, and old Yharnam was lost long ago. You might not have considered it, but I have kept track of time in this madness. The sun should have risen several hours ago. 7 hours, to be precise.
Fiachra stood quiet for a time. Jura had never considered it, just like he said. But then again, he had been back and forth into a dream.
Everything is wrong,
Kenrick suddenly shouted.
I have had enough with this nightmare. Let old Yharnam burn. It is only home to beasts now.
That is folly, Kenrick.
Jura yelled back in a slightly less steady tone.
Burning the entire town. You are the one stricken with madness if you think it is the only option left.
Then what is there?
Before he could give an answer, Fiachra shoved him aside and walked threateningly close to Kenrick's face, and the man became tense with surprise by the sudden approach.
What is this, Kenrick?
Fiachra wondered out loud to himself.
Have the blood gotten to you?
Kenrick returned the menacing glare, and he postured himself confidently.
Don't try anything.
Kenrick.
Jura stepped out from behind Fiachra's tall figure, trying to break their tension.
It is not within your right. It's the church's decision. Besides, German has the final word in the matter.
Another powder keg who had tapped his fingers on the barrel lid suddenly stopped and looked at him.
Come now, Jura. It's a war zone. It's our duty to make these decisions, however hard they may be.
That is not at all what...
Henrik had loudly joined the argument, but was drowned out by every other hunter who started to speak up on their own, increasing the volume from a murmur into a screaming fight between a divide of people standing behind either Fiachra or Kenrick. Quickly had redundant arguments erupted between the different hunters that all were equally incomprehensible due to everyone speaking at once. Jura, silent as he were, only observed the faces of men and women who had hunted for a long night and had been quiet about it until now. Equally silent was Fiachra, with his arms crossed. It was hard to tell his impression from under the beaked mask, but his point never once turned away from Kenrick, who was shouting at him, although what he exactly said went unheard. The arguments were heated and motionful, and Kenrick pointed aggressively on Fiachra's chest. The light, but somewhat patronizing gesture caused Fiachra to deflect his arm while drawing his blade. Not brandishing it at him, but Kenrick saw it as a threat nonetheless, and quickly reached for his scythe. It was truly poor judgment, for Fiachra had not seemingly drawn in attack, but perhaps as a wicked trickery to see Kenrick's state of mind, and Kenrick made the wrong decision. He swung his scythe at him, Fiachra stepping to the side and swung horizontally at Kenrick, which he dodged by leaping towards and around Fiachra, causing the barrel to roll onto its side. In an impressive and dreadful motion, Fiachra severed the other blade from the first, which he swung backwards and hit Kenric straight in the stomach, followed up with a pirouette which sliced up his throat with the other blade. Kenric gurgled and coughed up blood as more amounts poured forth from his wound, and he fell backwards into the arms of Gratia, who desperately called his name in despair and shock while all other hunters stood still, only watching with astonishment and a kindred detachment to the sight of death. Fiachra kept his guard up, but all was too stunned to act.
Fiends of the blood. Fiends of the nightmare. When will you see what it brings? When will you learn to behave so that I will be spared from this nightmare?
There was a fearful tremble in his voice, but also a commanding and dominating presence within that manifested all the fears every hunter ever had for the crow-feathered hunter of hunters. Kenric's body then dissolved into a fine mist in Gratia's arms. Only the blood that had poured from his wounds remained of him.
What? What did you do to him, fiend?
She flew up, but was held back by another powder keg standing right behind her. Jura saw that he had his head turned towards the second room. Every one of them slowly looked towards the blue light of the lamp, where they all witnessed a figure standing up, in front of the light, as if just awakening from slumber. Kenric stood there for a moment, completely still, his face darkened by the blue light shining at his back in the murky room. He walked slowly towards them like a true spectre of ill harbourings. When he walked into the room, no one appeared especially surprised at seeing him, except for Gratia, who made an astonished, almost horrified gasp. Fiachra looked only for a moment at him, after which he turned to Jura. The two of them shared in an understanding, and Fiachra calmly put aside his blade of mercy.
The blood curse may yet to have taken you, master of the powder cakes,
Fiachra proclaimed ceremoniously.
Pray that your wits return and save you from the demise of a fool.
He turned to the exit and left. Jura looked back at Kenric, that had his head turned to where Fiachra had disappeared, looking after him with an expression of vexation. Not anger, perhaps not even a hint of maliciousness. He simply looked tired.
This is not the wish of Germund. We have all night,
Jura said, but the determination in Kenric's expression from before his demise returned.
Yes, and at this pace, the night will go on forever, if we don't bring about the morning by force.
Jura sighed, and very slightly, pleadingly, shook his head. Kenric looked away, down to the floor.
Take them out of here. What? Are you still?
Henrik shouted out into the dead silent hall, directed at Kenrick. But Jura stepped up beside him, halting his approach to the master of the powder kegs. He stared into the firm eyes of the reawakened hunter, who looked back at him. He had known him for as long as he had been part of the hunters. A man who had stood beside Master German. A man that had held strong for so many years, through tragedies, and had remained a close friend through it all. It made him unable to hate him. Or at least, there was no agitation or strong malice that he felt within. But he knew that Kenrick was not the same. And perhaps it was something new that Jura indeed hated. But then again, had he not himself also changed? Kenrick turned to Gratia.
You go with them,
he ordered firmly. Still she met his eyes with defiance, but softened when he maintained that tired demeanor.
I'll keep them safe, Master.
She shook his hand, then gave a nod to the other powder kegs, before stepping over to Jura.
You keep yourself safe, simple Gratia,
he said with a smirk, making her emit a sob that she masked as a chuckle.
I'll prepare a route for us,
Jura said.
Gather up the people and move after me. Any powder keg who still wishes to see the morning, come with us.
Not a single one of the powder keg hunters motioned to answer his call, but stood faithfully by their master, and the town they had guarded since the days of the Otto workshop. The roars and ghoulish voices of beasts did not induce the same fear as they once did. Perhaps it was just plain madness that had him growing accustomed. Perhaps he was mad. Or perhaps he was at peace. Kenrick did not ponder on it long, for he had found it hard to tell them apart. They had left the workshop as a group, but one by one split off, merging with the shadow and quietly left for their location. Their targets were the larger structures in Old Yarnam, setting them ablaze and secure a way for the fire to spread. What they each did with themselves after the fire was lit, no one had considered, for they knew there was a dream waiting for them. Though it was not tactical to move in such a large group, bearing loads of gunpowder and liquor bottles, he had insisted on shaking the hands of every powder keg as they left for their final assignment. He saw it as a formality that he owed them, and that he could not predict the outcome and consequences of the morning, whenever it would come. One by one they scurried off, after having grasped his hand in farewell. Some had been naively optimistic, and anticipated that all would reunite once more. Others had seen it like he did, as the final farewell. Lastly, he bid the final of his ever loyal hunters Godspeed on her quest, and she set off. Situated in the center was a macabre square with bodies piled high, the result of the night's feast, now abandoned in favor of fresher prey. Not far away lay the church where the practice of blood healing had its humble beginning, although few by this point recalled it. The whole of the town had always been full of old wooden abodes and trees that scattered the streets, all of which would burn nicely, likely only leaving the stone structures standing like black shells. Kenrick entered a massive chapel with one of the ancient altars by its entrance. It lay empty, and he started to place out bags of the gunpowder. Blood had pooled below the altar from bodies laying massacred in the hall. He poured spirit over the dry wooden benches and placed them along the open windows, through which he could now spot the first flames along the roofs in the distance. Hopefully the rest of the hunters would have gathered enough manpower to barricade the streets leading out from Old Yarnam, as they likely were about to face the night's greatest defensive challenge, but also the last. He was, however, more concerned that the church would not look kindly on this decision. Perhaps he had gone mad, but so had the times. He climbed up to the roof to spy over the town. He had liked Old Yarnam the most. Shunned by the pompous aristocrats that thought themselves above just because their district was. He had found a humility here that was truly unique. They had faced much together, the people of Old Yarnam, and now he would set them free. The last service he could provide as a hunter, as taught by the magnificent German, was to show them all mercy. Around him the blazes grew in numbers, followed by flames rising up in the streets. Their powder was so effective he could visibly see how it scattered with the wind to alight everything with haste that it touched. Within the span of minutes had a quarter of the town's roof caught fire. He hoped to catch a last glimpse of someone running to safety. But even if he could from this distance, they would pass by hidden. He looked up at the red moon and foolishly cursed at it, as if it were responsible. He left the roof, climbed into the rafters of the chapel, ignited a Molotov, and threw it downward. It exploded, and an inferno erupted in such heat and force that he felt it from his height. It devoured the benches and licked the stone walls, quickly seeking to the trees outside. He climbed to the roof once more and heard the satisfying whines and agony of beasts violently perishing in the flames. Then he ran, overwhelmed by a maddening frenzy summoned by the nature of his deed. He tried not to contain himself. If he were to go truly mad here, he might as well do so properly. That was the last lucid thought he had before he was lost to regret, fear, and glorious triumph. He awakened from the infernal nightmare back in the workshop. It felt relieving, and he basked in its familiarity. He rolled onto his back on the stone-laid path and looked up into the cloud-covered sky. The doll approached him where he lay, and he smiled at the pleasure of seeing the brave woman again. He came to his feet and looked into her emotionless face.
Gehrman awaits you, good hunter.
She pointed to the garden.
Go through the gate and into the field. You will find him at the foot of the great tree.
Gehrman? Right. Of course.
Dawn is breaking and the nightmare is over. Go see Gehrman. And be well, good hunter.
She left him there and walked up the steps into the workshop and closed its double doors behind her. He walked through the garden that he knew so well. The field, however, were unfamiliar, but it had all the stargazer lilies so favored by Gehrman. And there, at the top of a slight slope of green grass and lilies, at the foot of the great tree, he stood, magnificent as ever, supporting a pegged leg with a cane. He approached him. The master looked truly like a disappointed father, sympathetical by the folly of the young.
Good Kenrick, you did what was asked of you.
Master Gehrman, I cannot... I do not know what to do now. He shook his head.
This hunt was long, but you were brash. Though I cannot blame you. You never knew what was intended.
What was?
Oh, dear friend, I will spare you from knowing. Now, this dream is over. It is time to wake up. They will not take kindly to what you have done, but I'm sure you knew that.
He nodded.
You will die here, and awaken under the morning sun. The hunt will be over for you.
He nodded again.
Kneel, please.
Kenrick kneeled down, hoping for a true end. He heard the drawing of the blade and its joining with the handle behind his back. He turned his head down.
Farewell, my friend. Always fear the blood.
Burial blade. Trick weapon wielded by Gehrman, the first hunter. A masterpiece that defined the entire array of weapons crafted at the workshop. Its blade is forged with siderite, said to have fallen from the heavens. Gehrman surely saw the hunt
as a dirge of farewell, wishing only that his prey might rest in peace, never again to awaken to another harrowing nightmare.